This is my wife, Tiffany Brown. She's here with me today to talk a little bit about what makes kids the way they are, which I guess is appropriate since we made like 6 kids together. And we'll talk a little bit about the differences between them and how what that means about kids and parenting and teaching. And anytime you're working with kids, it's good to know a little bit about this stuff and how it works here. So, do you want to say anything before we move on here? Maybe just a little bit of something. Maybe Master Uwe wants to say something here.
I don't know, but he's sneaking in.
Yes, he's very, very sneaky. So, do you want to turn off your phone?
Turn off my phone?
All right.
I'm keeping track of my children. That's how I have my phone.
Oh yes, very good. That's we approve of that. Keeping track of your children here on Jeff Brown's Classroom. We're very children conscious. Okay, so first of all, I want to start off with a clip from Lego Batman that we can talk about here. So I'm going to play it here.
Phantom Zone projector. Do exactly as I say.
10-4.
Okay. Jump. Do a front flip. Do a back flip.
What?
Run. Drop. That's excellent listening. You're right. I am super proud of myself for being such a good teacher, obviously.
All right, so those of you who are listening, that was Batman telling Robin what to do. Robin was doing exactly what he said, and then when Robin did it, he obviously praised himself. So, do you feel like sometimes parents or teachers feel like that's what parenting is about, is telling kids what to do when they do it?
Yeah. It seems like that's what we think it is.
So, is that how it really is, though? Like, how does that relate to what it's really like?
I feel like we always get questioned, so there's more to it. So kids do not always want to just do what they're told to do, just because you said to do it. So.
Like, how often do they want to just do stuff because you told them to do it?
I think that first of all, they have to know why they're doing it. So they might question you first.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, now when I say empty the dishwasher, they will go empty the dishwasher. But they know that that's because that's their chore and their responsibility.
Yeah.
But initially, if you just say, go empty the dishwasher, they might be like, why?
Yeah.
Why do I need to empty the dishwasher? No, I'm not going to do it.
Yes. Very.
I don't know.
So the second part there, so oftentimes we think parenting is telling kids what to do, and if they do it, then that means we're being a good parent. And oftentimes I feel like it's hard as a parent to separate the motivation of doing what is best for kids versus making yourself feel like a good parent. Do you feel like that can be tricky sometimes?
Yeah. I don't feel like I'm ever a good parent, which is really sad. But I feel like if my kid is following the path that I see in my mind is the right path, then yeah, I feel better about it. Like, personally, I do. I will feel better about it. And then if they decide that they want to go off here and I'm like, oh, why did they do that? What did I do wrong? Or what did I say wrong? Then I start to feel like I didn't do something right. So yeah, I put a lot of how good am I a parent on what they decide to do, which it's not necessarily my responsibility all the way, because they do have their choices.
So first of all, everybody should know she's a very good parent. But let's talk about that for a second, why you feel like you're not a good parent or why you never do. And second of all, how is it that wanting to feel like a good parent can sometimes get in the way of being a good parent?
So first question.
Yeah.
I don't know why I don't ever feel like a good parent. I guess because I always think that I could have done something better. Like, I could have done it differently or done it better. But that's just kind of my life. And well,
perfectionism. We'll get to perfectionism in another podcast in the future here.
The second,
as I say about perfectionism, is if you're a perfectionist, then get used to disappointment. But again, that's another podcast.
Lower your expectations.
Can always do something better, right?
Right. Well, I mean, I guess we could always say that, right?
Exactly.
Do something better. The second question was, remind me.
How can wanting to feel like a good parent actually get in the way of doing what is the right thing for kids sometimes?
I think that's easy because because like as a parent, I'd be so stuck on this being the only or the best. Maybe this is the best choice. This is the best way. This is the pace. This is the way I really want you to choose and go. And I already have my mindset on that. Then for them to choose something different, then it might like crush me, or I think it's totally wrong, or then they don't have my support necessarily when they may need my support and my help to follow that way.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes that when we think that being a good parent means them doing what we say, then oftentimes that can lead to dark side tactics, which we talked about in my last 2 podcasts here, which is sometimes we have conditional love for them because we're disappointed because we feel like bad parents because they didn't do what we said. And that makes us feel, unlike Batman, like we're such good teachers because they took a different path. Do you feel like that's ever kind of what happens sometimes?
Yeah, which is really sad because they need to grow up and make their own decisions. I mean, we guide them. Like, you can't just like let your 7-year-old decide what they're, certain things that they're going to do, like that they're going to go drive the car or something. It's age appropriate.
Yeah.
But as a parent, like age appropriate, how do we help and guide them without expecting them to do exactly what we think they should do?
Yeah.
Right? I don't know.
Well, and that's what we're talking about with the Batman thing there is we think that parenting or teaching is us telling them stuff, them doing excellent listening and following that, and then if they do that, then that means we're good teachers. And that's what we want to feel when we're doing that rather than other stuff.
Well, I think you also as a parent, like you might see other kids, like maybe your friends' kids, like looking like they do exactly what their parents say or they're, and then you compare yourself and you think that, well, how come their kids do what they say?
Yeah.
How come my kids fight against me? Then what am I doing wrong?
Yeah. Okay. And that's actually a good segue into what we're going to be talking about here, which is why it's useless to compare your kids to other kids and also your own kids to your own other kids. That sounds kind of confusing. But why do you think that is useless, first of all, before we get into some of the reasons before that?
Well, it's horrible because, like, I've seen my kids who think that I'm comparing them to each other and then them feeling inferior to another one. Or they feel like they're not as good as because they do things differently. When I'm not really trying to compare them because I think they're all individuals. But it's kind of, I almost feels like it's an innate thing that we compare ourselves. So my own kids will compare themselves to each other or think that mom likes him better because he listens more or something like that.
Yeah.
Or he made this choice that I didn't make, so she likes him better.
Yeah.
Which I don't want him to feel that way. I want him to totally feel that I love them all uniquely. But I think that we just kind of do that. Like, I think I did that with my sisters. Compared myself to my sisters and, thinking that they were better and that my parents liked them better or whatever.
Yeah. So if you had to rank all your kids based on favorite to least favorite, should we go through that now?
There's no way. There's no way.
Totally just kidding. Kids, we do not have favorites at all.
No.
So, all right. So, let's go a little bit deeper into that also, which is you say that you love them all as individuals, and this podcast is a little bit about what makes kids individuals, what makes them the way they are, and a lot about the nature versus nurture stuff here. So, whoops, hold on. Okay. So you and I have talked a little bit about nature versus nurture in the past. In fact, about a week ago, we had an argument with our son, Jensen, who loves to argue, by the way.
Especially about this topic.
Yes, this is one of his favorite topics to argue about. Ever since he had psychology with his awesome psychology teacher, Miss Bryant, by the way, hopefully you hear this one time. He loves to bring up whether it's nature versus nurture, and it leads to some interesting discussion. So, we talked about it. We talked about some of the studies, but
No. What are you doing?
do you remember? A little man is jumping up. He wants to be part of the podcast. So, do you remember kind of what the mix of nature versus nurture and a lot of the studies are and things like that we talked about?
It's around 50%.
Around 50%. 50%-ish.
So like
varying a
I don't
little bit
know,
from...
below 50 and a little bit above 50 for each one.
Yeah. So let's go through that really quickly for the audience here. What they found actually, based on some studies, which I'll explain here in a little bit here, which is that there are 4 traits that they've really studied a lot on the nature versus nurture. They call this the Big Four. And they found that like openness, which is how creative, imaginary, and open to new ideas you are, is about 57% genetic. So there's a pretty high genetic component to that, which leaves 43% for environment and also choice factors and other stuff that's harder to measure. Okay?
Oh, but could that be like your opportunities too?
Yeah,
Like 40%.
that's your environment, exactly, which is your opportunity and your training and your teaching and all that kind of stuff. So, do you feel like there's, like looking at our own 6 kids here, we have 6 kids, by the way, ranging from age 24 all the way down
25.
to 25. She turned 25 3 months ago. I always forget. But she always forgets too, so that's okay. So
25 to 8.
25 to 8.
Yeah, this is 8.
And we have a wide mix of personality traits and stuff like that. Our oldest child is also autistic as well, and we also have an ADHD kid and some other kids who are somewhere in there also. And
Issues.
and likely they got that stuff from me because I'm pretty autistic also. So, but that's a whole nother podcast as well. But in any case here, looking at our 6 kids, would you feel like there's a pretty big difference or they're pretty similar or what, even though they come from the same gene pool of you and me?
That's a good question. Imagining open to new ideas you are. Creative, imagining, open. They come from the same gene pool. Their creativity and imagination.
It's
It's
kind of harder to
different.
measure, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. It's different. Every one of them is different.
All right, let's go from a different standpoint here. Conscientiousness. This is a little bit easier to see. How organized and detailed oriented you are, as is 49% genetic according to the studies. So, is there a pretty big range of how conscientious our kids are?
Yeah.
Organization, you can almost just look at the rooms to see the differences, right?
Yeah.
Like Felicity, our 8-year-old, likes a nice organized room.
Very detail oriented.
And Spencer, where they were sharing a room before, they like having separate rooms now. Well, Felicity does, mainly because she likes to keep her room organized.
She says Spencer's room is always messy.
Spencer is always messy, so even within our gene pool, there's still a variation of what genes they got from. And between you and me, there's a big difference also. All right?
Yes.
I'm the conscientious one,
Ha,
and
ha.
Tiffany is the total messy one.
Whatever. I am more detail oriented, I would have to say.
Okay, yes. I am not the conscientious one. I'm totally the...
So I know where all the dishes go in the kitchen. And even though we've had the same kitchen for, we had the same
changed the
kitchen. We just
last
changed
summer.
the kitchen recently. But we had the same kitchen for like 26 years. And still,
Well, I'd
he
forget where stuff
always
would
would
go.
forget where stuff went.
I just, yeah. So I have to put trackers on all my... I just recently for Christmas got a bunch of trackers so I could track all my devices.
Which
because
reminds me, do you have one on Oogway?
I do not... Actually, I usually put a tracker on Master Oogway also when we let him go, but he's over there rummaging through my stuff over there.
Oh, okay.
So...
He gets lost
So,
sometimes.
let's just say I'm not the most conscientious person. So, between us creating 6 kids, you're going to get a wide range depending on how much of their genes they got from what and what's the mix going to be as well. So, now, here's where it gets to the interesting thing. So, is it really useful to compare Spencer to Felicity and say to Spencer, why aren't you as conscientious and detail-oriented as Felicity is?
Absolutely not.
Why not? For our audience here.
I would say because you're definitely going to have you'll have different skills and talents, and maybe that's not his strongest suit, but he'll have something else that he does well.
Yeah. So it's just not very helpful, partly because we might think that they are choosing to this way, but there's more that goes into what makes them the way they are, even if they're siblings, and it's even less so if they're not siblings, right? There's a big, wider range of genetic variation, so comparing Spencer or Felicity to somebody else's kids, what's the usefulness of that?
There's no usefulness.
No.
Because everybody is different.
They start with different things.
I feel bad now thinking that's not a bad thing that Spencer's room is messier than Felicity's. He
It's
just
just
keeps his organized in a different way. Unless
It's just a
Apparent,
fact
like-
that it's less.
like a less clean way. But organized, he says it's organized, so it's organized to his specifications.
Yeah, well, that's what I like to say also. So Tiffany used to have a hard time coming to my classroom because she'd be like, see all the piles and stuff like that, which I've actually gotten better at that. But yeah,
So you have less paper.
my dad, yeah, I have to go to a non-paper system here. So my dad used to always make fun of my notebook that I had in college. I think he took a picture of it.
We
and
have a
showed
picture of it.
I mean,
I think it's in the scrapbook.
from high school. It's basically just tons of papers all thrown into a 3-ring binder, none of them in the binder, but just in there. And that's-
Which some of our kids, their binders look like that.
Yes. Which is a very ADHD trait. And we do have that going on in our house also. So, all right, so conscientiousness. Let's go to the next one, which is extroversion. Is how you relate to people and how outgoing you are. So it's kind of how outgoing versus how shy you are. What would you say about differences in our kids for that?
I feel like we almost have half and half. Like almost 3 and 3. With like more outgoing.
Yeah.
Like I feel like there's 3 of them that are more outgoing.
Okay.
And there's 3 of them that are just definitely not as outgoing. Don't you think? Can you picture him?
Yeah, probably.
I'm putting Ammon in the more outgoing.
Yeah, I got that. So we got Ammon, who is our 19-year-old, and then he's almost 20, and then we have we put Emmeline in there, who's 17 years old. She's a social butterfly.
She's very, yeah, she likes to be social.
Now, interestingly enough, she hasn't always been that way, right?
Well, she has some social anxiety, so that she knows sometimes it's hard for her to maybe get out and do it, but then she always has a great time and enjoys it.
Well, what I mean is when she was in middle school, in 9th grade, she was very different in that way, right?
Yeah, actually,
Because she was quite a bit more shy. She didn't
Yeah.
really have much friends that time.
Mhm.
So what changed is the
The
environment,
environment
changed,
changed.
which is she started taking anti-anxiety medication. And
No, it was just like getting involved in high school stuff, really.
well, she
Right.
also says it was the medication that made a big difference for her.
Oh, I thought she started that later.
So, nope, that was right around
Sophomore?
sophomore year, somewhere around then. I had one of her teachers, Mr. Abbott, great teacher also at Rampart as well, said it's amazing to see how much she's come out of her shell. And Emmeline herself told me that she attributes that part of that is to getting on anti-anxiety medication. So it kind of helped her overcome that. And genes actually express themselves differently depending on the environment as well. So the environment will affect the expression of genes. So, but then we also have some kids who are extremely shy. Felicity is definitely one of the outgoing one. So she likes to have friends. She likes
She
to go to
needs
school.
a play date every day. She loves school. She loves people.
Yeah.
She's super fun.
And then there's Spencer, who has one, sometimes 2 friends that he feels comfortable with. We've got Jensen, who's just really quiet. And then we have Geneva, who's autistic and socializing just is kind of draining to her. So she really likes certain environments that, like D&D. She likes to play Dungeons and Dragons, which is oftentimes a really good environment for autistics and whoever else likes it, but is structured and helps her feel more comfortable so that she can socialize. So again, yeah, within our own gene pool and between you and me, right,
Mm-hmm.
there's a big difference.
Very big difference.
I'm very social, and Tiffany wants to stay home with the dog all the time.
Totally opposite. I'm the one that always wants to go out and do stuff.
Yes, okay, well, and yes, I'm the dog person, which is funny that the dog is sitting on her lap right now.
Because I'm not the dog person.
So I like dogs because they give me companionship without the feeling of anxiety being around humans. And so that's a whole nother thing also. So, Agreeableness. How you are working with others and how easygoing you are. That's 42%. Okay, so that's a little bit less genetic than the others, but still pretty close to 50%. So I don't know that we necessarily need to go along those lines there. We might have some upset kids if we start comparing how agreeable they are. And neuroticism. Wait, how many is it? That 4 or 5? So there's openness. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 5. 5 traits. Big 5, not big 4. I totally forgot that. So neuroticism, which is how much worry and how emotionally stable you are. And that's about 48% genetic. And I don't think we need to compare our kids on how neurotic they are necessarily either. But let's just say that our family does have a gene pool that comes from some anxiety and social anxiety and stuff like that. So they say about happiness itself is around 50% genetic, which is kind of goes along with this here. So, all right, so that goes to the question is how did they find out? Like, where did they come up with these numbers? Like, it looks like, 48%, that seems oddly specific. Like, did they just make that up? And the answer is yes, they did. They just made it up. No, I'm just kidding. They didn't make that up. That would just be silly. They did not make that up. So, how did they do that? So, let me show you a little bit how they do that. Actually, I need to skip ahead and then we'll come back to these here. So, has a little bit to do with twin studies, actually. Okay. And what they do is they compare twins with fraternal twins to see how much more similar identical twins are to their fraternal twin components.
Professors James Fowler and Tim Spector have split the twins. Identicals on the left, non-identicals on the right. A blue card means the twins share the same opinion. A yellow one means they don't.
The way the classic twin study works is we compare identical twins who share 100% of their genes to fraternal twins who share about 50% of their genes on average. And if those twins come from similar environments, then what that suggests is that if the identical twins are more similar than the fraternal twins, then the genes are playing a role in whatever it is that we're looking at.
Are you within 10 kilos in weight of each other?
What we want to find out in this experiment is whether the identical twins on the left are showing us more blue signs, meaning they're both agreeing at the same time, or on the right side we'd expect to see more yellows because we'd expect to see more disagreement.
Thank you very much.
Surprisingly, they're finding that genes play a part in some fundamental areas of our behaviour.
Do you support the same political party as your twin? Yes. Controversial. Do you support the same political party as your twin? Thank you very much.
So anyways, for those of you who are listening out there, this comes from twin studies where they're comparing identical twins with fraternal twins. And they want to see if there is more agreement between identical twins versus fraternal twins. And as we can see, there is some differences in a lot of very surprising aspects of personality. For instance, what political party that you support, they found that is genetically related. Or even if you're a religious person or not, that is actually genetically related as well. So there's a lot of surprising things about what makes us the way we are. And that's kind of where they get those numbers, 42%, 47%, 52%. They get it from studies like this. Now, every once in a while, they get a very interesting study where they get separated twins. Now, that's more rare because you can't do that on purpose because that's not very ethical. But sometimes they find separated twins and they are able to tell that there is some similarities between them also. So let me actually just show a quick segment here with that about that kind of show these two girls that were separated at pretty close to birth in China, and one ended up in America in Sacramento and another ended up in, I think it's Norway, I can't remember. So I'll show you just a clip from that.
How old are you guys?
6.
The families have been joined by Dr. Nancy Siegel, a world expert in twins raised apart.
Hold your arms out.
Yeah, good idea. I'm interested in Mia and Alexandra for a number of reasons. They are identical twins, the same genes, in totally different environments. This gives us an ideal opportunity to see the extent to which genes underlie behavioral and physical and medical characteristics. So Mia and Alexandra, just by being raised apart, are a wonderful natural experiment.
Oh, Alexandra, you look beautiful.
Dr. Siegel has studied a number of twins who met as adults, but this is her first opportunity to observe separated twins as they grow up.
So do you guys have any other brothers or sisters?
I have a big brother.
Uh-huh. And how about you? Do you have any other brothers or sisters?
I have a sister.
Yeah, you do. Isn't that great?
Two sisters. Michelle and my
Well,
mom.
hi, you guys. Nice to meet you, sisters.
Here's a great scientific experiment. These two were raised apart, but Alexandra was raised with two sisters.
Yes.
And how similar is she to her two sisters?
Oh, she will pick up something from them.
Uh-huh.
And learn, of course, some behavior.
Uh-huh.
But when I see them now, they are more alike than she will be alike
Yes.
her sisters at home.
Yeah.
So that video that we just watched, you can see that even though the kids were separated at birth, that they were more alike each other than their siblings that they grew up with because of the genetic factor. So the genes actually play a stronger role than most people think, which is why I think it's pretty useless to compare your kids against each other because they have a different set of genes. That's going to mean different things for them. And it's also very much useless to compare your kids against other kids. And all that stuff leads to harmful parenting practices also. So I want to talk a little bit about how some ideas that we may carry may affect the way that we parent also. And the fact that our kids are their own people due to their genes and their environment and what makes them them changes these ideas if we truly understand them. So the first one is, I had another teacher, he retired a few years ago, his favorite phrase was ideas have consequences. And so we're going to talk about some of the consequences of these ideas right here. So the first one is that my child is an extension of me. So let's say if you have that idea, what kind of consequences would that have for the way that you parent?
I feel like you'd be really, really concerned on like what it looks like, everything that they do, right? Like what it looks like because it's reflecting on you. So then I don't know, I would feel like you wouldn't let them
be a little bit more controlling maybe?
Yeah, definitely be more controlling because you'd be like, you have to do it this way or I'm going to look really bad.
In a sense, our controlling of them would feel like just our controlling of ourselves. Like we control ourselves so we can control our kids also because they're a part of me.
I guess I was almost saying more of like, I don't know, maybe not an extension of me. An extension of me might be that you like try to live through them too, right?
Yeah, that can happen that also.
Like if you're trying to live through them, then you're like, yeah, go out with that boy because like he's super cute. Or, you know, you might get too into that or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that can happen also. Or kids who...
or go do all these activities because I never got a chance to.
Yeah.
Maybe you push them to do too much.
That could be also.
I don't know.
Or that's where you get your typical stage parents or parents of kids that are really into dance or club sports or any of those kind of things where we feel like that we're living through them, in a sense, right? Okay. So next question is, how my child behaves is a perfect indicator of my ability to parent. If I have that idea...
So that might have been more what I was answering initially, right?
Okay. Well,
like how I look, like how I'll look to other people.
Yeah.
Is like how my child behaves. Like I think that's acceptable behavior, then I would feel good, right? Or if I feel like, yikes, don't do that, that looks bad, now I look like a bad parent, then your love is conditional, really, right? Like you do what I want you to do, and then...
Like we're pleased with our kids if they do what we want, because that makes us feel good.
Right. Whereas we need to give them support and love and help with whatever they're dealing with.
Yeah. So we kind of have to give up that idea in order to... And also, I think that affects how we see other parents and other kids, right? How does it affect how we look at other people?
Well, yeah, if we're going to say how our kid acts is how good a parent we are, then if we have that thought process, we're already saying that about other parents, right?
Yeah.
How their kid acts is how good a parent they are.
And I think that leads to a lot of judgmentalness of other... I just made up that word, but of how we think about other parents by how their kids act. If we see them crazy and all that kind of stuff, we're like, well, my kids wouldn't do that, or stuff like that. Or we say, like, some people's kids, you know, like they're bad because of the way their kids are. And that also, I think, really feeds the comparison, where we compare our kids versus their kids, because how are we supposed to judge ourselves as a parent unless we judge how our kids behave versus how other kids behave? That leads to all kinds of...
Someone's home.
That can lead to all kinds of unnecessary feelings of either feeling inferior or superior, which might be completely wrong, right? In either way. Like, for instance, if a hypothetical kid does all the things that you dream of as a kid, they grow up to be a doctor, they go to an Ivy League school, does that necessarily mean you've been a parent? School with the talented and gifted kids. These kids do really well. I asked them what their biggest fears were and what they saw as success. Their biggest fears were letting down their parents. And the other thing was their biggest thoughts of success were getting into the right school and getting a successful career. And they felt like if they did that, they wouldn't let their parents down, because that was their biggest fears. And sometimes these kids carry these things even if parents don't put it on them. But a lot of times parents may unwittingly be putting these pressures on them by bringing honor to the family, so to speak. It's a phrase from Mulan, right?
And I'm reading your shirt there. Dishonor.
Oh, yeah.
Dishonor on you. Dishonor on your cow.
Yeah. I got my shirt right now for those of you listening here, which is Mushu, saying dishonor on you, right? So in Mulan, right, that's her whole pressure, is to marry right so that she brings honor to the family. Okay? And that's, a lot of kids carry that pressure because parents feel like that they're perfect parents if they are that. Okay, let's continue on here. So I'm a successful parent if a child stays in my religion. So would that have a positive or a negative effect on the way we parent?
I think it definitely would have a negative effect, because I feel like that could definitely drive your kids away from what you want if you're going to put that much kind of pressure on them to believe as you do or follow what you do.
Yeah. And Tiffany and I are both very religious, but we try and make it clear to our kids that we're going to love them and support them, and regardless of whether they end up staying in the religion or not. And that's important for them to be able to explore it and understand it on their own terms, rather than through fear of disappointing their parents. Okay? So, next question. I'm successful as a parent if my child achieves blank. So it could be anything. It could be being a really good soccer player, or getting into Ivy League school, or getting a scholarship, or getting a successful job. That kind of goes along with pretty much everything else we've talked about.
Yeah.
Anything extra to say about that, maybe?
No. Maybe that we just stay away from that. Like, I don't want to even have that thought. Like, my kid is going to be successful if they do this. Like, I just want to stay away from that. Because then, I just feel like that makes a dysfunctional relationship with my kid.
So if you could tell your kid this was what it means to be successful, what would you say?
I can't say that because you just made me totally emotional.
Sorry, everybody, but Tiffany's very emotional.
I'm really an emotional person, and I cry a lot. And you can ask any of my kids, because things that are close to my heart make me cry. So sorry, and now I have a really weird sounding voice, which I really hate. So it's really hard to talk when I'm crying.
Nobody likes their voice, is what I told her. She didn't want to do this podcast first because she's worried about her voice. But
I hate my voice. I don't want to ever hear this.
Nobody likes their voice.
No, because I hate my voice.
Except for Morgan Freeman, he likes his voice.
My voice sounds really weird, and it sounds even worse when I'm trying to hold back tears. I think success is if my child is happy and loving other people, and It doesn't have to be any kind of achievement of the world. I just want them to be good people, to care about others. And I really want them to be happy.
I like that. So we want them to be happy, we want them to care about other people, and we want them to make the world a better place. Those are our big things, right? So, and if they don't do that, then we will not like their kids. No, I'm just kidding. The idea is to love your kids, like your kids, regardless, and I think that gives them the freedom to learn those things from us, right? I want to bring up just a couple more things. Sometimes I hear from my students from time to time. This one is, my child won't have mental health problems if I'm a good parent. What do you think about that idea? Do you think that's a good idea to have?
Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry for our children. Because mental health problems do not come from our parenting skills.
Well, we have some mental health genes in our gene pool, and so our kids have gotten them also. But does that mean we're bad parents?
I
mean,
no.
It means I'm a good parent. I don't know about you, but
well, I don't think we can't necessarily help our genes, but if we have genes that are going to give them extra challenges, which have given us extra challenges,
yeah.
Best thing we can do is like try and teach them how we deal with our challenges, maybe.
So yeah, sometimes I'll say to my kids, sorry that you got these genes, but don't forget, without these genes you wouldn't be alive. So you get life, but there's a curse that goes with this also, which is struggling with mental health. But I think on the whole, being alive is still a good thing. So yeah. All right. So do not be that parent who wants to not deny their kid mental health help because they want to ignore that they have these problems. I have students at school who say that their parents don't want to believe that they have mental health problems, sometimes because they feel like they've failed themselves. But the fact is you failed if you don't get them the help they need, not if they have those problems. It's like thinking, if you're a doctor, thinking that I failed if my kids never get sick. That's dumb, right? They're going to get sick. So the question is, are they going to get the help that they need? And the last one is, my child will be happy if I'm a good parent. That kind of goes along the same lines with mental health problems. Sometimes our kids are going to be happy, sometimes they aren't, due to their genes or their environment or their choices. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you've done something wrong, or
maybe it does mean we have done something wrong.
It can mean that, right? If we do wrong things as a parent, then our kids will probably be unhappy in some big ways. But if they are unhappy, you can't reverse engineer that and say that all parents with unhappy kids are bad parents either, right?
Right.
So there's just no way to judge that. There's no way to know that kind of thing. So I think the main thing is we try our best to provide a good environment for the kids, and hopefully they find their way to happiness. Because can you necessarily give your child happiness? Like, can we say, I have happiness, I'm giving it to you right now, so you've got it as well?
I wish I could make my kids happy.
Yeah.
That'd be my dream.
I like to think of happiness as kind of as a quest and as a journey. Everybody has to find it on their own quest, and we can give them a map to it, show it to them. But even the quest itself is wrought with peril. I like the word peril.
But do you know what I just said?
Yeah.
My dream is to make them happy. Well, if they think like chocolate makes them happy and I give them chocolate, then what? Like that I'm always giving them what they want to try and make them happy. That's a bad parenting thing.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. So so a lot of parents think that if I just give my kids what they want, then my kids will be happy.
Right.
Why
So
is that?
if I make their life easier,
So what's wrong with that?
then my kids will be happy.
Because they
Because that's
do
not
seem
what-
happier when we do that, right?
Yeah, but that's not really where happiness comes from. So if I give them everything, but they never learn how to work hard, then they go out into the world, then I failed them. Because then they don't know how to work, and there's nobody to hand them things.
So it'll give them immediate happiness, right? But
Yes.
long term, it'll hurt their long term happiness.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, giving our children happiness means making them less happy now. Like Spencer wanting to quit not do piano lessons tomorrow.
Just because it's his birthday.
Yes. We know that learning to play the piano is going to make him happy in the long run, even if he doesn't always want to do it now. So that's again with that can you can
always have trouble with that because like I really don't like when my kids are sad.
Yeah.
Like, oh, maybe I just like skip it. But no. You gotta be strong.
Well, it's easy to become a people pleaser as a parent because we think that makes our kid happy. But what's the problem with that? Well, they don't learn what they need to, right? Mm-hmm. Like for instance, I don't know hard time getting to the right segment on this one here, which is that there's a false dichotomy. So you got like different parenting philosophies. You've got the permissive style, which is if I give my kid what they want, then they'll be happy. And then they've got the opposite side, which is the authoritarian style, which is if I'm like the drill sergeant, then they'll learn everything they need to be so that they can be happy later. But both of those are a little bit problematic, right?
Well, it's like having two extremes, right?
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can have high expectations of an authoritarian parent without the authoritarian style parenting. You can, which is what we talked about a little bit in the last two podcasts, and I'm going to talk a little bit about more in the future, which is how to be a parent that has high expectations and teaches to those expectations without being an authoritarian or being a permissive parent. So,
right in the middle.
Yeah. Well,
somewhere on the side. I don't know.
So we'll talk a little bit more about my next podcast. I'll talk a little bit more about how environment influences that as well, so we can get more deeper into that as well. But anything more you want to say about being the parent of 6 perfect children?
My poor children. And me as a parent, but I try really, really hard.
Well, that's the important thing, right? Now, the other thing we want to talk about is not being a perfectionist as a parent, because that can lead to authoritarian. It could either one of these things actually. It could be as an authoritarian or permissive. And I actually have a video series on Encanto where we talk about how perfectionism among the parents can lead to conditional love of the kids and those kind of things as well. So I'll put a link to that as well. So.
Okay.
Thank you all for being part of our podcast again. Thank you, Tiffany. She was really nervous to come on here, and she said, if it doesn't work out, you got to find someone else. But I think you did amazing, and I think it was perfect for this particular subject that we could talk about our kids and how amazing they are. Right, kids? Those of you who are listening.
There's one of my amazing kids.
And Emmeline is coming down the stair right now, so... All right. Thanks, everyone. Also, check out my website, jeffbrownsclassroom.com. You can find all kinds of resources that go along with this podcast and other things that go along with it as well.